Good morning and welcome to our webinar about Does Your Business Need Project Management? We're happy to welcome you to this webinar. Let me tell you a little bit about CoreTech Revolution. CoreTech has been in business for 15 years. It's evolved from a small website development organization into a leading healthcare IT consulting firm. And CoreTech has clients throughout the entire country. We work with healthcare and technology companies of all sizes, and we work on issues such as strategic planning, organizational change, project process development, digital medicine, workflow optimization, all kinds of HIPAA regulations, etc. The principal owner of CoreTech Revolution is Michelle Burton. Michelle has over 20 years of healthcare technology experience. She's an expert in program and project management, as well as strategies for health information exchanges and EMR deployment. Michelle will actually be the key leader in our webinar this morning. She has worked with companies of all sizes across the country, and her focus is on delivering results. My name's Jane Dieterberger, and I have over 30 years experience in companies of all sizes, primarily focused in healthcare and technology. I've held several different senior executive positions, and right now I'm working with CoreTech and have been for several years as a partner in their strategy deliverables. So let's get started. Before we begin, we want you to know that we are recording this webinar and the slide deck will be emailed to you so that you will have the slides. Please submit your questions anytime and we'll do the Q&A at the end of the session. And lastly, after we are done with the webinar, we will email you a survey, and your feedback is really important to us so that we can make improvements as we do webinars in the future. With that, I'd like to hand it off to Michelle Burton, who will lead this webinar. Michelle?
Thank you, Jane. Good morning. So glad to have you here. During this webinar, we're going to go through just the general definition of project management, why you need project management, how project management can help your team promote success, and some of the immediate benefits you would see from project management if you were to roll it out appropriately within your team. And then, of course, as Jane already mentioned, there's an opportunity for questions and any follow-ups that you might have. So, of course, we're going to start with the general definition of project management. I think most all of us know what project management is intended to be. It's defined as the practice of initiating, planning, executing, controlling, and closing the work a team achieves to achieve goals and meet specific success criteria within a specified amount of time. That's the general definition of project management. But I can tell you from years and years of experience that in reality, project management is a great deal more than that. If you have a strong project management team within your organization, you can often find that they can be the lifeblood of your team. They know so much more about what happens inside your organization, likely than even many executive leadership team members do. Project management can be portfolio management, it can be program management. These are the people who inside your organization are going to drive your strategic vision. They know what drives your team. They know when a team member says that they're going to get something done in 2 days, that particular team member probably takes 5 days to do something. They are just one of the most underestimated and most valuable resources inside an organization. And I want to share a personal example. I had a client, it's been a few years back now, but they're just a really good example, who brought in CoreTech as a project management consulting company and had a project that they wanted to have done. And they hand off to us this project that was to migrate data from one location to another. And they said, okay, here, get it done. This is really easy. Here's all your contacts. And so as a project manager, of course, you start to dig in and find out that it is extremely more complicated than they had originally estimated, the senior leadership team had originally estimated. And so at that point, we had to go back to the leadership team and share with them, hey, your external customers are not on board with this migration. Here's why they're not on board with this migration. Here are the challenges that they are facing. And beyond that, internally, your team is giving a wishy-washy message to those external customers. You have a hard deadline, but that's not being communicated. And so your customers feel like they can push back on you and make this hard deadline go much farther out than you would probably intend for it to go. And those were some very difficult conversations to have with the leadership team because, oftentimes executives, they don't want to hear when they're part of the problem. They think they know their customers. So when they're learning that they don't know their customers as well as they think they did, they don't like to hear that either. And so it's just really important as you're thinking about project management to remember that these people who are leading your project teams, if you hold them in the right regard, they actually are extremely valuable because they know both sides, right? They know what your team is capable of doing. They know what your customers are expecting, whether those are internal or external customers. And they have to be the bridge between the executive team, oftentimes, and all of those outside resources, whether it be your clients, your team, your vendors, to pull together something and deliver it within a time frame that's expected. So again, I say project management is so much more than just, lines on a project plan. They truly are, a good solid project management team truly does drive your organizational vision. And you want to be aware of that as you're going through understanding what a project management team can really do for you. And so I just want to take some time and talk about what project management is and what it is not. I have often heard of project management referred to as professional cat herding. In fact, with one of the clients I was recently working on, I had to, on a regular basis, work with their executive management team to pull together a bi-weekly status report that would go to the CEO. And we did this virtually via like a Slack channel and some other tools. And getting these executive leaders, these C-level executive leaders, to provide status and input into this report that was going to go to their CEO was nothing short of like trying to pull teeth from a tiger. It was truly a difficult task, one that should not have been nearly as difficult as it was. And so they often joked themselves inside this Slack channel that, I was their professional cat herder and they were the cats. They would send little memes of it. They just really had fun with it because they realized that they were being a very challenging group of people to pull information from. So project management can be a lot of things. What I want to focus on is what it is not. So it's not an overhead expense. It's not just implementing a new product or service. It's not just used in large companies and corporations. I often see it very successfully used in smaller organizations. And it's not just a set of tools that you use for follow-ups and administrative functions. Project management is, again, and I know I already said this, so I don't want to sound like a broken record. It truly is what drives the strategic vision of your organization. And unfortunately, our clients often bring us in, and I only say this because I think this is a problem, I think, across all arenas. Our clients bring us in when things are kind of falling apart, right? So when the project is at a crossroads, when things aren't getting done, when deadlines are getting ready to be missed, it's often a hair on fire experience when somebody will bring in an outside consultant. You know, oh my gosh, our deadline is a month away and we're nowhere close to meeting it. How can you help us meet this deadline? And so project managers become this saving grace. They go from a team of people that an organization doesn't really think they need because they view it as an administrative function to this savior of a team or of a project to help things get done. And honestly, and having talked to many clients over the years to say, hey, why do you wait so long to bring in project management? Why don't you start your project with a solid project management team so that you can achieve that success over the longer term, you know, right out of the gate? And their answer is exactly what I've just said. They did not think they needed it. They thought their developers could manage their own time, or they thought their vendors could manage what they needed. The need to have somebody who's sort of overseeing everything is, to many, they think it is a waste of funding or effort because people should be able to manage their own time. And I think the real challenge with that is that those individual people are looking at the project from their individual perspectives. And so you have to kind of shift the focus, and that's what a project manager does, to looking at something from a bigger picture. And that's where project management starts to drive value, improve efficiencies, lower costs. You get better customer service and stakeholder buy-in. Projects finish on time because you have somebody who's not just looking at things from their one perspective, but they're looking at things organizationally. So what is the organization's goal and why is that goal important? And we have a team of 5 developers and the work that would take 10 developers to do. And so how are we going to manage that? Or, you know, this vendor doesn't have us on their schedule for another month, but we have this project finishing in a month. And so they're just bridging all those gaps and pulling things together as one, you know, cohesive thing to achieve a goal and having the appropriate conversations across leadership. And, you know, one of the other challenges that I've often found in working with clients when it comes to what project management is or isn't, is that often the leadership team has a high level of picture of what their team is capable of and what their resources are, but they don't have that detailed level view. And so often unrealistic dates are being requested at a leadership level because they don't fully understand why the team is not meeting those dates. And so that is one of the ways that a project manager can truly improve efficiencies. I had a client recently who was just, their projects were just kind of all over the place. They have a small team of resources and a vendor organization that they were working with, and they just weren't getting things done and they couldn't understand why. And it's because their team had all of these tasks that they had to get done, and they knew they had all of these tasks that they had to get done. There was even a project plan that illustrated them, but they didn't have a good understanding of the amount of time it was going to take to complete each task, who should be doing it, in what order they should be done in order to maximize effectiveness, and just generally speaking, the resources needed some additional direction. And so what we did for that particular team was go in and roll out an agile project management process. And we won't get deep into what agile is in this call because you can have a whole training session all in and of itself around agile. But basically what that did is it took the list of tasks and it put them into a tool that allowed us to estimate those tasks, roll out a sprint process that put a certain number of tasks inside of a 2-week period in this case, assign resources to those tasks. The resources had buy-in because they had to commit that what was getting assigned to them in that 2-week period was something they could deliver. And what this organization immediately saw was results. They started to see work moving forward. And that's always what an executive, likes to see. They want to track measures, right? How do you track those measures? How do we know we're being successful? So this is just one way that allowed us to improve efficiency and start to get things done. And then another solid thing that a project manager brings to a team that generally can improve overall efficiencies is just knowing when to say no to an executive team and how to escalate issues. So, a project manager has the unfortunate job of when things aren't going right, they have to be able to talk to their executive leadership team. And those messages aren't always fun, as we've already talked about. And so you have to know when to be able to say no to that executive team, when to say that date you're asking for is not possible. Now, the key in doing this successfully is you have to have an executive team that is willing to listen. If you don't have a team, if you have an executive that you're working with that just wants you to tell them, yes, we can meet that goal, then that's a problem. So as an executive, you need to make sure you understand where you sit on that side of the fence and evaluate yourself. But you also have to have a project manager who can share that information, who feels empowered to share that information with that executive team and isn't going to just go in and say, that's not possible, but they're going to go in and say, that's not realistic, and here's why it's not realistic. Here is what's possible. So you don't just go in and say no. You go in and you say no, you say why, and you say what is possible. And then on top of that, a good project manager isn't only managing the executive team, right? So they're not only looking to improve efficiency and lower costs and track metrics at an executive level, they're also managing the project team themselves. They're looking for when the project team is starting to get burnt out. They're looking for when the project team needs to be encouraged, when the work is difficult, when people have been putting in extra hours. And they're also taking that information to the people that those project team members care about. So whether it's a direct line manager or an executive, the project manager is sharing it with those people and saying, hey, your team is just really getting burnt out, and you need to bring lunch in for them, or have cookies delivered, or send an email to encourage them. And just promote that collaboration and appreciation within your team. Because even if a project manager is doing that, that doesn't have the same impact as when leadership is doing that. And so just understanding when those things need to happen will, again, also help to pull together all of these things that an executive team is really looking for, with those improved efficiencies and hitting your dates and lower costs, because you have a more highly motivated team. And so when I say project management is not just tools, it's not just implementing new services or lowering expenses or sending out emails, those are the kinds of things that I'm talking about. It's managing your executive team and their expectations and knowing how to do that effectively and in line with strategic goals. And it's also managing your project team and looking out for those burnout moments and ways that are going to motivate those team members to keep things moving forward so they feel appreciated and cared about and heard. Those are some really, really important things to consider as you're thinking about what project management truly is. And so the next thing we want to talk about is how to determine if your organization or your team can truly benefit from project management processes. And I think Jane has some really great examples that she wants to share with us just from her experiences having been a former CIO or CEO of different organizations. So Jane, I will leave it to you.
Okay, thank you. There are many ways that project management has basically saved me in my roles as a senior executive. The biggest one is business outcomes. If you think about how you are rewarded and evaluated and even function as a company, it's getting things done and delivering results. And so in order to have a group focused in the right manner, oftentimes putting a project manager in place and project managing the outcome you want will assure success. Some of the best examples that I can think of that are almost too easy are if you think back to Y2K, when everybody thought that all the computers and systems would crash as the date turned over to the year 2000 and computers weren't programmed properly. That's when we really saw a big insurgence of project managers come into the workplace, because we needed to evaluate what were the systems that were going to be impacted, and not only the technology system, if you think about it, but the business processes, and what were the outcomes of it not working, and how do you prioritize which issues are more important than others, and the list goes on and on and on. But the driver was, if you didn't get this right, or you didn't hedge your bets in the right places on 1/1/2000, all bets were off. So it was a very real deadline. It was an international deadline, and they were tied to systems that were driving your business. So putting project managers in place to look at absolutely everything was critical. If you think of HIPAA regulations and the whole HIPAA implementation and the penalties attached to if you are not or were not HIPAA compliant at certain points, it's the same type of scenario where you need somebody who's eating, sleeping, breathing this program. And as Michelle said, it's not just the outcomes, it's the team who is working to get it done. Do they have the tools in place? Do they have the support in place? And that is really their primary focus. It's not all the other distractions that go on in a corporation or in a company. They can pretty much, I say, have a narrow focus, but Michelle just spent a whole lot of time talking about how it's really not a narrow focus, but it's a single or a more single thread of thinking, if you will. So I spent a lot of time in my career doing systems migration, HIPAA compliance, Y2K type things. And I can say with certainty it never would have been successful without strong project managers throughout. And the best part of that is in that process, when you have good project managers looking out, they're also assessing and developing talent for you. So they're building new project managers. They're helping to build new leaders who you can deploy in other parts of the organization, or even have them run that function so that you continue to have positive outcomes. Another area to think about is competitive advantage. By putting project managers or the whole project management discipline in place, I have found that you're able to get to market faster. There was one company I worked for that we rolled out a new, very customer-facing healthcare product that required a different kinds of identification card, different call-in numbers and customer service, relationships and expectations. It was an entirely different way of approaching a traditional business. And by bringing in project managers who didn't have the baggage and the the anchors of the other parts of the company that could truly look at this in a refreshing new way and figure out the most expedient way to get this product to market with happy customers. They could look across company lines, so it wasn't just looking at the enrollment system, it was looking at customer service systems, it was working with the sales organization on the timelines of when could you actually start telling people this product would be available, making sure that technology had the systems and programs, software in place so that for the roll-up to the new product, and then making sure the customer service staff could answer the phones and have the knowledge to be able to answer questions. So very complex, but it allowed us to get to market much faster because we had dedicated teams. The last part is to prevent overspending. And this is always an issue when you're managing budgets, when you're looking at how you're getting work done. You want to spend where it's necessary, but you want to spend it on meaningful work. And yet you want somebody who knows when to say, this is less meaningful. This is not where we should be spending our time and our money. And again, good project managers, good project management processes allow that to happen because there's a path to getting things done. So Michelle just spoke briefly about there's an increased efficiency, and by using people better, you save time and you save money. She talked briefly about the systems migration work that she had done working with the company. And in that process, there were many areas or opportunities to overspend or to spend on things that would not help move that ball forward. And by looking at the process, by evaluating where we needed to be at any given point in time, Michelle was clearly able to articulate, here's the priority, here's where the money goes, here's where the people goes, here's where the resources go right now. And ultimately, that was a successful project. I worked with another large healthcare organization on the East Coast because they had a compliance issue. And they had to put in a new process and program to make sure that they were compliant in delivering health care to an underserved population. But they had a very limited budget on how to do that. So by bringing in me, it was, here's your pot of money, here's where we need to get to. Help us do it properly. And again, by using the whole discipline of project management, it's easy to sit down with a CFO and say, here's where we're overspending. I can't let these people kind of go off the tracks, if you will. I need them to be spending it in outreach programs and in educating the people who need the services as opposed to building a better internal IT system or what have you. So again, by having that discipline and that plan, you can clearly see where things need to be spent and where they have less value for you. It keeps you very focused. I guess that's the best way to say it. Michelle, I think I've covered the examples. If there's more, please let me know.
Thanks, Jane. So next we want to talk about how, as an executive, you can help promote solid project management in your team. And I think, you know, when you look at these, they seem obvious, but when we put them into practice, we've seen some challenges that are consistent across many executive teams. And so we just kind of want to share some of those examples with you. So, you know, the obvious stuff is pay attention. If your project team is giving you documentation, make sure you're reading it and providing thoughtful input. You know, support your team. Help them to remove the obstacles that are in their way. provide a clear organizational vision. Very often that vision will change, and that's okay, because a year is a long time, and a vision is often set at the beginning of the year, or goals are set at the beginning of the year. It's okay if they change. Just make sure you're communicating that and being clear. And then, of course, say what you mean, walk the talk. Those are obvious. What they break down to, or some of the key challenges that we've seen that as an executive you should really be paying attention to, I cannot stress this enough, is that C-level executives, of course, you don't have time to pay attention to every detail inside of an organization. The larger your organization is, the less time you have to pay attention to the minute details. And to be quite honest, that's not what you're there for, to pay attention to the everyday details. That's why you have your downline team members. And nobody wants to be micromanaged. But there are things that as an executive, you should absolutely be paying attention to. And the example that comes to mind for me, because I have seen this over and over again repeatedly, is at the very beginning of a project, a solid project management team and a solid project manager, the first thing they're going to do is put together a project charter. It is a document that I often refer to as the Bible for your project. It is your source of truth for everything. It talks about your scope, your resources, who's doing what, what's in scope, what's out of scope, what key deliverables are, and when certain milestones have to be hit in order for you to achieve your overall organizational goal. For strategic projects, if this document comes to an executive, it needs to be read. It needs to be read thoughtfully, because what I have seen happen more times than I want to share is that an executive gets that document and they're so busy, they skim it, they provide some general feedback, and they move on. And so the project team is like, this is great, we have executive approval, we are golden, and they start to move forward. And a month later or 2 months later, something doesn't happen, and that same executive who approved that document raises their hand and says, what? That's not what I wanted. I wanted this. I was always clear about what I said. Why did you not listen to me, project team? And the project manager and the project team is scratching their head and going, well, we heard you say that, and we thought you meant this, and this is what we documented in this document that you approved. Why didn't you say something 2 months ago or a month ago or whenever it was when you read this document? And of course, you can't really say that to an executive because that would cause all kinds of problems. But the key takeaway here is, as an executive leader, take the time to read that document. If your project team feels it's important enough to share it with you, make sure you're reading it. And make sure you're giving thoughtful input, and make sure that the goals that they've outlined in that document align with the strategic goals of your organization in the way that you as an executive expect them to. Because if you are not doing that at an executive level when your project team asks you to, you are not helping the project to be a success. In fact, you are having the opposite impact on your project team, and that is not what anyone wants. Because then time is wasted, money is lost, morale is beat down. Those are not the things you want inside your project. So you don't have to pay attention to every detail that happens inside of a project, but pay attention to that one and make sure you're providing thoughtful input, because that is a critical point inside of your project. And then the other key area where we see the executive and management teams sometimes fall down and can really help to improve the project team is with that support of the project team and removing obstacles. So, again, you don't have to pay attention to all the details, but your team is going to bring obstacles to you, risks, things that are falling apart. And they're going to tell you, likely, exactly what they need from you in order to make that go away, whatever their problem is, go away. And what I often see happen, or what we often see happen inside CoreTech, is that instead of focusing on what the project team has brought to you, oh, we have a risk. This risk needs to be mitigated. Here's what the project team is asking me to do. They want me to talk to this vendor. They want me to get an additional resource in. They want me to remove, Bob from the project team and bring in Sally because she has a stronger skill set. Instead of focusing on that, a lot of times what happens is the executive team starts to focus on, or the management team starts to focus on, how did this happen? Why did this happen? Whose fault is this? In the midst of your project, when you're trying to get something accomplished, sometimes that matters. If the problem is catastrophic, it can matter. But most of the time, in that moment, who did it and why may need to be dealt with, but it does not matter in that moment. What matters in that moment is supporting your team and moving things forward. Deal with the aftermath after, later, because that right there is showing your project team a lot. I mean, nobody likes the finger pointing game, because in that moment, was it Sally's fault or Bob's fault? Who cares? Let's just go, we need Sally to do this and we need Bob to do this. And that's what's going to keep the project moving forward. So let's deal with that, right? So it shows the team that you have their back, that you're not looking for who's to blame. And that's crucial, especially if you're in a high stressful project situation. And, it helps to build collaboration amongst the team. It makes the team feel like it's a safe place, like they can come to you with problems. And you don't waste a lot of time spinning your wheels looking for the answer that you don't need in that moment, right? When the project's done and you debrief, then it's time for those conversations. But in the thick of the moment, you just want to fix the problem and move forward. And your project team needs to feel trusted and supported. And honestly, sometimes most of the mistakes or problems that happen inside of a project are just that. They're mistakes, because people are human. And so, Bob doesn't want you highlighting his mistake to the whole project team. He doesn't want to be put up on display, because we all make mistakes, even executives, right? So let's not focus on the mistake. Let's focus on how to fix the problem. Let's do that in a collaborative way. Let's move forward, and let's see the project find a successful end. So again, that only begins to scratch the surface on ways that you can help your project team. But from personal experience, having done this for such a long time, those are the two key places where we see the executive team can really benefit from stepping up to help to build that collaboration, meet goals, reduce costs, and just allow the project team to have some additional successes. So then, assuming you do all these things and you've got the right project team in place, you've rolled out a project management process, you've stepped up from an executive leadership level, what are some of the immediate benefits you're going to see inside your organization? Again, some of these seem very obvious. You're going to see cost savings. You're going to start to achieve your goals. What are the goals inside your organization? And you're going to see the team rally around those goals and really just start to support them in a collaborative way. You're going to see increased revenue and team ownership and efficient results, because your product or service is going to get to market faster. It's going to get to market better. And a lot of times you're going to see that happen under budget because you have buy-in from your team. And we're going to talk in the next webinar more specifically about these metrics, how to track them, some of the tools available to track them, and why it's important to track them so that you know that you're achieving these successes. But just generally speaking, these are some of the key things that you're gonna see happen. And I just want to go back to that example I gave earlier around agile process rollout. So not only, when we talked about that, we talked about the that particular project team saw some immediate results around achieving their goals, and they were able to track and see, oh my goodness, we fixed 5 problems in the last 2 weeks, and in the last 2 months before that, we'd only fixed 3. So wow, this process is great. Not only were they able to see that immediate result, but there were other things around it too, because they were tracking resources against hours for particular tasks over a 2-week period, because that's what their agile process was built around, was 2-week sprints. They were able to see budgets, right? They were able to plan out their next 6 months using that agile process and go, okay, here's our roadmap. Here are all the things we need to get done in the next 6 months, broken down into these tasks. And so this is the budget that we're going to need over the next 6 months, because we know each one of these tasks, how much time it takes, which means these are the number of resources that we're going to need. So we don't overload our team members. And this is the prioritization that we need things to happen in. And so again, that's just one process, but that one process immediately allowed the team to see all of these benefits: cost savings, meeting goals, team ownership, efficient results. So again, that's just one example of how you can see immediate benefits inside a project. There are so many more, and again, we could do multiple meetings on all the different project management processes, but I just wanted to share with you one example. Jane, I think you also have an example you wanted to share.
I do. I was actually brought into a large company to implement a whole new managed care system and basically lead a business transformation to swap the company from an old-time insurer into a new managed care organization. And I brought in a firm to help me with the project and program management because I didn't know the people, I didn't know the company that well, and I knew I needed the discipline. The benefits of that were absolutely amazing. Within days, I got a good sense of exactly where were we in the process. Where were my areas of risk? Where did I need to work with other executives to get their arms around certain situations and certain decisions so that we could move forward? Where did I have gaps in terms of talent and training going forward? So I needed to start filling and recruiting for them. Where was money and time being spent versus where should it be spent? And then I had that process on an ongoing basis once we got our arms around it. The other part that was really fun to see is my team, my employees there, as opposed to the consultants, started learning immediately from the outside organization I brought in. They saw the discipline with how they were managing the process, what they were tracking, how they were communicating. And they started adopting these behaviors immediately, to the point where they got such a positive sense of control and positive feedback in the work that they were doing that we were quickly able to bring those skills in-house and not necessarily need as much help from the outside, because our own team and our own staff saw the value in that and were able to emulate it. So it truly gave the organization a sense of success, a sense of moving forward, and we ended up accomplishing what we wanted to accomplish on time and within budget, which as an executive, that's a home run. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, Jane. So key takeaways from today are, what have we learned? So we learned what project management is not. We learned that it is not just about sending out emails, tracking timelines. It's not administrative. We learned that it's so much more than that it's about organizational strategy. It's about being able to communicate with executives and being able to keep a team motivated. It's about understanding what vendors need. It's about a big picture thinking. And we got some perspective from Jane's experiences as a former CEO, CIO, COO, all the different roles that she played. And we hopefully we're able to share with you some of the examples about, how you can help to promote success and see some of the immediate benefits inside your team to achieve those successes, and make sure you know that you're on the right path. And like I mentioned before, in our next webinar, we're going to get into a lot more detail about how to track some of those metrics. Today's conversation was really just about making sure we're level setting what the expectations are around project management and what you as an executive should be taking away from your project management team, what your expectations should be from them as you're rolling that out. So with that, we would like to answer any questions that you might have so that we can help to further your knowledge in this arena. And while we're waiting on folks to type out questions, I just want to share a reminder that we have some additional webinars coming up. As I mentioned, we'll talk about how to measure when a project is successful or when it's not being successful in our next webinar on the 23rd. And then on the 30th, we'll talk about making sure you're finding the right project team. And so we encourage you, if you have not already done so, to sign up for those sessions, because we feel like those will be very valuable to you.
Okay, Michelle, we do have a question. It's, how do I start a PM program in my company, and where do I start?
Yeah, so that can be extremely, an extremely overwhelming concept to think about. And you start small, right? Don't try, it's that saying, and I'm probably going to get it wrong, how do you eat an elephant, right? It's one bite at a time. So don't try to take on the world in one fell swoop, right? You would start small. If you were going to start with project management in your organization, you want to start by building the team, and building the team starts with one person. If you have a solid project management resource on your team, great, pull them into those conversations. If you don't, then you want to figure out what is it that you need from a solid project management resource, build that job description, make sure you hire the right person. And again, it's critical. I cannot stress this enough. Some project management resources are going to come in and they're going to want to be taskmasters. They're going to want to just do what you tell them to do. A good project manager is more than just a taskmaster. So make sure you're finding someone who can have those conversations at an executive level. Start with that resource and then build your team and processes from there, because that key resource is going to help take your project management to the next level. Jane, I don't know if there's anything you would want to add to that response.
I was going to say, I think you did a very nice job. It's really focusing on the right person, the one that will have the conversation, the one that can speak with executives, because without that, you're just hiring doers or taskmasters.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so if there are no other questions, we're just going to remind you that you're going to get an email after today's session that will provide you with some resources based on our conversations today. Along with this slide deck, you'll get some other resources. So we encourage you to follow that link and get access to that information. And please sign up for the next session. This is only, like I said, this one only scratches the surface. So there's a lot more information that we would love to share with you. And if you have questions that you don't want to ask here, or you just like a little bit more insight, please feel free to reach out to Jane and I. We're here to help and share our experiences with you. So thank you so much for your time today. It was a pleasure getting the opportunity to talk to you, and we'll look forward to talking to you again on the next session.